Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It's Friday, it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. But before I get into last week's video, house admin, is there anything I need to mention? Yes. This time next week, so on the release of next week's video, my Mousetrap EP will be out. That is the 7th of June 2019. It's currently available as pre-save on Spotify, so I'll drop a link below this video in the info box. So that is all good. Keep your eyes open for some teasers over the next 7 days. What else is there? Well, some of you will have heard a good chunk of at least one of the tracks anyway. Other thing I wanted to talk about was, oh yeah, on the note of Spotify, I think last week I dropped a link below the video to a Spotify playlist that I've started putting together and curating. That's been really well received and lots of good feedback on that. I have updated it this week, so it's now a fresh bunch of tracks in there, or mostly. I think it's about 3.5 hours long, which is kind of where I'm trying to keep it. Yeah, so that's updated. Go check it out. I think you can get to that via spotify.domkane.com. What else? And talking of domkane.com, that's the other thing then as well, is so this video goes out today. It won't be today, I think it's on Monday coming up, but I'll drop a link anyway. Some of you might remember I mentioned a company run by a mate of mine called Vibecast. That's the company's name, not my mate's name. So it's like a web design building website, but for DJs, producers, people like you guys watching this video. They have done all the beta testing and they are now launching and going live Monday, I think. So I think pretty much anyone can sign up as of Monday, but I'll talk more about that next week anyway. Yeah, I obviously, you know, hands up, it's a mate of mine that runs the company who I've known for years. So I'm going to be a bit biased, but genuinely, I've liked using it so much that I've actually shifted domkane.com and parked it onto my Vibecast page because it's so much easier to look after than, well, I was using WordPress, and I've tried Wix and I've tried all of those things and they don't really work for me, just because every time I try and build a website, you know, one day it's HTML, then I move to PHP, then I move to whatever, and it's one thing after another. And again with WordPress, it's just a nightmare of a menu system and whatever. This is literally drag and drop. You upload your photo, you upload your biography, you copy and paste the text, you drag and drop the layout, you put in your SoundCloud links and move your tracks around. Really, really easy to use. Great website, highly recommended. Go check it out. And that, I think, is house admin for this week. Yeah, I don't think there was anything else I needed to mention yet. No, that's probably the most organised house admin I've ever done on this channel. So, straight on with last week's video. Let's have a look at the comments. Starting at the top, Reality on X Production, Paper, high five. Hey Dom, waiting for your new EP, waiting for whatever you release. Thank you. So yeah, as I've just said, there'll be a link below this to pre-save on Spotify. Please do go and do that and share the link around. Casey Music. Hi Dom, first thanks. The EP will come out in June. Mine too. I will post a link once it's released. Please do. I had a pretty interesting discussion with a friend recently and wanted to ask you about this. Do you think that 4 on the Floor is the future of EDM? Or will there be a change in time signatures over the next years? I personally think that 4 on the Floor will always be a big part of this genre, but I'm so excited to see what people can do in other signatures. Like Draft did in his Mousetrap EPs. What do you think about that? So, I think I know what you mean. 4 on the floor, you're meaning just kick drums on every beat. But you did mention time signatures, which is a little bit different, because 4 on the floor could be 5/4 time signature, but it would be 5 on the floor. But anyway, let's not get into that. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Kick drum based stuff that's a kick drum on every beat. I mean, really, that's always been where electronic music has sat for the majority, going back as far as, 70s disco was really where it came from, and the first house records were sort of sampling disco. So I think it'll always be there traditionally, but I do enjoy people breaking that boundary and trying new things. And Draft is a great example, actually. His last few EPs have been really good. I think he's just self-released one, actually. I'm questioning myself there. I know he's released a new EP, but I don't know if it's self-released. I think it's self-released. So go check him out on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube as well. I think it's usually like /Draft UK. But yeah, he's always done some great productions, so well worth a look. So yeah, so I think 4 on the floor, will it be the future? Yeah, probably, but I think people will always experiment and venture out into other things as well, much like Draft did, and that's awesome. Paper, high five. Ricky John, Paper, high five. Hi Dom, still been lurking the last couple of weeks. Good content as always. Not a common type of question for me, as I'm not ready yet. But would you say it's more worthwhile to release on lesser known small labels, if offered, or to self-release? I ask as a bit of a hermit who doesn't really know anyone in the proggy techie side of the industry for context. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so yes. I mean, okay, I struggle with this, I must admit. So first of all, I think collaboration, and I think everybody talks about collaboration being this great power in today's society, and it kind of is. And I think you need to remember that if you sign a track to a record label of any shape and size, in effect, that is a collaboration, and that's how you need to treat it. It's a collaborative effort to publish that music. And because of that, those two entities, i.e. you and the label, will have two separate fan bases or two separate channels or methods or whatever it is to get access to put your art in front of new people. So I think if you look at it from that perspective, it is important and it is beneficial for you to sign to record labels of any shape and size. However, if they are very small labels, then releasing time and time again through that same label maybe isn't so beneficial, unless you and the label both share similar goals and are aiming for the same long-term things and you have plans and structures in place. So I think that's something to consider for you guys that are thinking about whether to self-release or to work with smaller labels. The other thing, I've mentioned this before about self-releasing. So I don't know how some people manage to do it, but there are some people out there who self-release and gain huge exposure from self-releasing. Now, I know full well that if I was to self-release, let's say my EP that's out next week on Mousetrap, if I did it myself, I don't like playing my own trumpet. I don't like bigging myself up. I'm not a very good hype machine. I don't hype myself up very well. as anyone watching these videos can probably tell, I'm a bit boring. I'm not I'm not an exciting person. I get excited about and I'm passionate about things, but I'm not an exciting, controversial personality. That's not what I'm about. So when it comes to marketing and hype, it's not my game. So I'm aware of that, and if I was to self-release an EP, I don't really see it doing much, because that's not my thing. I like making music. I don't talk the talk. I don't go out and socialize and, you know, rub shoulders with the elite, or I don't know, whatever it is you're supposed to do. I don't do that stuff. I'm quite content. So for me, it definitely is worthwhile me releasing through any record label of any size, whether it be big or small. Obviously, the bigger the better. But even still, I would be better off releasing with a small label than self-releasing. So hopefully that answers your question. I think fundamentally what I'm trying to say is, if you're a hype machine, if you've got the gift of the gab, and you know, you like blowing your own trumpet and getting out there and mingling and whatever it is you need to do to market yourself, if you're good at that, and there are lots of people out there who are naturally gifted at these things, then I would say self-release for as long as you can and see what happens. See how far you can push that, because the benefits in the long run, if you imagine this imaginary status of fame and fortune or success or whatever measurement you want from this, and one route is through releasing through a big record label, and the other route is through self-releasing. If two people did, one person did self-release, one person released through a big label, and you both made it to the same level of success, fame and fortune, that person self-releasing will be making far more money than that guy, and will have more control, will have more ownership, will have better management, will be less in debt. You know, the person self-releasing will be in a way better situation in life than the person who released through a big label. But it's all a question of how you got there and if you can get there. Personally, I know self-releasing, I wouldn't get there. I wouldn't get to that level. I wouldn't get to even where I am now, and that's not anything huge. But self-releasing wouldn't have got me to where I am now. That was a very long way of answering the question, but hopefully it's helped you out. In fact, you've kind of answered with me there, because I've just realised you've said I ask as a bit of a hermit who doesn't really know anyone in the proggy techie side of the industry. That, my friend, is the answer to your question. So you're probably more like me, where self-releasing probably isn't the right thing for you, unless you can sort of put on this mask and do whatever needs doing. Anyway, Deadly Custard, paper, high five. Hey Dom, when using some reverb to place an instrument in a mix, would you say it's best practice to place all similar instruments in the same room reverb type, or is using a different one for each okay? I've never thought about that, which maybe is the answer to your question. I guess what I'm asking is whether it's a problem to have a different reverb on each track, if that makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah, I think that's okay, because, well, okay, the thing is, I think you need to remember is, in electronic music, reverb as an entity is designed to try and recreate the roomy sound of a specific room. So if you're dealing with an orchestra recording, or a choir recording, or something acoustic and natural, and you wanted it to sound like it was in a church, you'd use that reverb, set it to church, blah blah blah, and you'd hope that the end listener goes, oh, this was recorded in a church. That's the idea. So clearly, if you were to give the tuba a really small room reverb, and then the violin a plate reverb, and then the oboe gets a huge extended church reverb, then clearly the listener on the end of it is going to go, hell's going on here? Why does everything sound bizarre? So I get that's kind of where your mindset is at, but in electronic music we don't have that issue. We don't have any rules. There are no rules with electronic music. You do what you want, and that's the beauty of electronic music. It's certainly one of the reasons why I like electronic music. It's because there are no rules. There's no, much like we were talking about 4 on the floor earlier on. Does it need to be 4 on the floor? No. Do you even need a kick drum? No. There's loads of great electronic tracks out there that don't even have one single kick drum in them, let alone 4 on the floor. Equally, there are some great tracks out there that maybe have 7 or 8 kick drums per bar, because they're double time, or maybe they're skip time or something like that. Hell, you can do anything you want. So when it comes to reverb, you could have, and I would have, for example, a snare drum. I would never have it anything more than a room reverb, unless, no, actually I'm lying again. So I would have a room reverb on a snare drum if it's every beat 2 and 4, but if it was beat 3 of every bar, I might go for a much more extended reverb because there's more room to play. And if my BPM is down to like 70 BPM or 80 BPM, I'd really drench and extend that reverb. Whereas if it was, say, 126 BPM, ploddy techno, then I'd have a really short, sharp reverb on the snare drum. But let's stick with that. I'm doing ploddy techno, and I've got really short reverb on a snare drum. Sounds very roomy, 5% wet, really tight sounding reverb. On one of the lead synths, I could put a 8-second decay on this huge roomy reverb, but maybe 80 or 90% wet on the reverb, because that's the creative choice I'm going for. It's about those individual instruments. It's not about the track as a whole at that point, so long as they work as a whole. And I think that's probably the important thing to remember there is as a producer, I think you have to remember to zoom in and zoom out every now and then. As you're producing a track, always zoom in and then zoom out. So what I mean by that is, if you're talking about reverb on a lead synth, you zoom into that, mentally zoom into that lead synth. You're just paying attention to that lead synth, and you're playing with the reverb, you're extending the decay time, you're playing with the dry wet levels, you're playing with the diffusion, whatever it is you're playing with, until you go, I love that sound, that's the sound I want. And that's when you mentally zoom out and go, right now, does it work with the rest of the track? Does it fit in there? Does the reverb need to be sent to a send channel and then covered in sidechain because it's a bit muddy in a certain frequency? Do we need to scoop out some of the low end of that reverb because it's a lead synth and you actually want it in the upper parts, and then maybe add some presence or whatever it is you're thinking it might need to fit in the rest of the track? And it's about being able to mentally zoom in and go, I'm liking this reverb, this sounds great, and then zoom out and go, so going back to the snare drum, for example, you zoom in mentally to that snare drum and you're playing with the room dial and the dry wet and getting it nice and crisp and tight, making sure it sits perfectly within the groove of the drums and it doesn't overlap the next snare or the next kick to an extent, and you wanting that tight sound to your snare drum. And then zoom out and go, right, how does it sound as a snare drum amongst the track? And I guess that's the important bit. But in answer to your question, it really doesn't matter. I don't think there's any hard and fast rules, because we're doing electronic music. We're not doing acoustic recordings. We're not trying to pretend to be an orchestra. We're not pretending to be a choir. Even if we're using choir sounds or orchestra sounds, if you're making an electronic track, all the rules go out the window and you can do anything you want. And I think that's generally how it works. So there we go. Next, Zombo, Paper, High Five. Ostinatos and 5/1 time signatures. I'm not that smart, Tom. Question, is it okay to use a scalar? I use the built-in one in Ableton. I'm not that smart either. I'm aware of ostinatos and 5/1 time signatures, but it's just a case of playing it. And I think one of the things I always say to people, I know I've mentioned this before, so I won't go off on a rampant tangent again, but I know I've had a couple of arguments with people in the past where they've said, oh yeah, music theory, you don't need that in electronic music. And while that's nearly true, how can you know what rules you're breaking or what rules are available to break if you don't know what the rules are in the first place? And I think that's quite important. So I would never say to someone who wants to start being a producer, oh, you need to learn music theory first. That's not what I'm saying at all. But over time, because fundamentally the best thing you can do is just experiment, have some fun, enjoy it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you will find there's a point in your production career or hobby or whatever it is for you, you're going to find there's a point where maybe you're struggling with a chord progression and you're thinking, this I want it to go up, but I can't find what notes make it go up, and I feel like when it goes up and it needs to come back down to loop in a 4 or 8 chord phrase or whatever, and I can't find the notes to get it to come down again. You know, it doesn't finish very nicely. Well, if you've studied basic music theory, you'll know that what you're looking for is a cadence, for example, and with a cadence you have, for example, a perfect cadence, and a perfect cadence comes down very specific notes depending on what scale you're in. So if you're in scale of C minor, then a perfect cadence will hit very specific notes within C minor to come back down to your root note being C, so that when you loop back again, or when you finish that phrase, you can just hit C as your root note and it sounds nice, and your ears naturally go, ah, that's the sound I wanted. And alternatively, if you want to go, screw the perfect cadence, I want to try something really drastic and scale up a cadence and make it weird and build tension, then knowing, like I say, what a cadence is, you know what not to do or whatever. So I think that's kind of my point, is music theory is quite important, but it's not the most important for electronic music. I hope that helps. So question, is it okay to use a scalar? I use the built-in one in Ableton. Yes, absolutely, 100%. But the only issue with this, and again, it's not a big issue at all, because I know I've given out some videos and tech tips on how to fold the keyboard on your piano roll screen so that you stick within a scale. Now that's all well and good until you want to venture outside of the scale, and that's really, you know, you've got to be careful that you don't block yourself from experimenting. If you're using a scalar and you set it to D major, everything you do is in D major. That's great. All your chords are going to work, all your notes are going to work, all your cadences are going to work. You're always going to reach back to the tonic. Everything's going to sound good and structured. But every now and then you might want to just slip outside of a scale, and that's not going to let you do it. And for me, I think I've mentioned this before, funnily enough, a track from my last EP, Topology, I scale down in a cadence actually at the end of the phrase. Well, actually at the beginning of the phrase is kind of a cadence, but the point being is there was always one bum note that I wanted to press because it made it sound eerie, and I never had the guts to press that one note, and I always regretted that after the track came out, because I always felt like, no, that's not in scale, that's not in, what was I, D minor, that note, I think it was D sharp, whatever it was, but it was not in D minor, so I kept wanting to press it, and it just sounded horrible, but in a good way. So that's kind of breaking the rules, and I didn't have the balls to do it. So topology sounds the way it sounds because I didn't have the balls to break the rules. However, in my next EP, which is out next week in all available stores, thank you very much, go get it now, there's a link below this video, with the lead track on that, Stoic, funnily enough, Stoic, the chord progression in Stoic came from my regret of the notation in topology, because I always regretted not using that one D sharp in a D minor scale. So what I've done then is I built an entire chord phrase inside, I think I stuck to D minor again, but I used that sharp note that shouldn't be there, and I used it at the end of a phrase, which again, we're talking about cadence and dropping to the tonic, and it's definitely wrong in terms of music theory, but it sounds really pleasant in an odd, uncomfortable way. And that's kind of the point, is that, which is why I called it Stoic, was because I was, no, I'm being stoic about this, and I'm forcing myself to break the rules. So yeah, so there's a little insight to my next EP. So yeah, listen out for that chord phrase in Stoic, and you should hopefully recognise that I used the bum notes that should have been in topology, but I was too scared to use it. So there we go. So like I say, using scalars, absolutely fine, but remember to break the rules and experiment. So just be careful, I guess. There we go. Rod Marconi, paper, high five. Hey Dom, thanks for another invaluable vlog. In regards to the business side of music production, what is the process of doing an official remix for a label? I'm just going to hit reset on the video here because I can see it is coming up to half an hour. There we go. In regards to the business side of music production, what is the process of doing an official remix for a label? Are you paid a one-off fee or a percentage of royalties? Kind of a tricky one to answer because there's no right or wrong. Yes and yes. So it depends on so many things. I've always had an issue with people working for free, and I'm just going to say it again right now. Even though I have done remixes for free, and probably will at some point again do remixes for free, I'm really against the idea of doing remixes for free. So let me just say that bit, because I think it devalues us as musicians. And I saw there's some meme or something the other week that says something along the lines of, it took me 10 years to learn to be able to make this thing in 30 minutes. You're paying me for the 10 years, not the 30 minutes. And I think that's very valid for us musicians and whatever, you know. I've been doing this 20 plus years, and I think after 20 plus years I should get paid for the work I do, because I've spent 20 plus years learning to get to this standard, and you know, that shouldn't be devalued, and I think we've got to be careful with that. However, that's not what you're asking. That's me going off on a tangent, sorry. So, doing an official remix for a label, they should really offer you a one-off fee, because royalties don't officially happen on a remix. There is no such thing officially as royalties on a remix, because there is master rights, which is sales royalties, and then there is writer credits or publishing royalties, which is the idea, the concept. Well, that writer credit stays the same on whether it's an original version or a remix or a cover or whatever. The writer is always the writer. So if a label is offering you royalties for a remix, they can only offer you sales royalties, because they probably don't own the publishing royalties. But that aside, there is no hard and fast rule. I think most labels will rather offer a one-off fee, because it's kind of down to the original artist as well, I suppose. But I think they would rather just offer a one-off fee at a certain level. But I think the smaller labels will usually offer royalties because they know there's really not much in there. And if they were to offer, you know, let's be honest, there's a lot of labels out there who will make $20 in royalties, and if they were to offer you $10, which is probably what you would get in royalties doing a remix, if they were to offer you $10 up front, you'd probably laugh in their face. Whereas if they offer you 50% royalties, then it sounds much better than $10. So I think the smaller labels will usually offer a royalty. The bigger labels will usually offer an upfront fee, and those can range from anything from, you know, there are labels that have offered me a couple of $100. There are labels that have offered me several thousand, and more. So it really depends on labels, budgets, timings, artists, how much hype there is about you as an artist. And this is the other thing, is you've got to remember as well that most labels are looking for you to do a or you need to ask why most labels are looking for you to do a remix. There are some people who have a certain stamp of authority by doing a remix, and they can command much bigger fees, whereas some people are just filler and they can't command big fees for remixes. And that's where you need to then question, should I do it for free or not? If you're doing it for free and you're just filler, then there's something gone horribly wrong. If you're asked to do a remix for free and you know that the remix you're doing is for an artist way out of your league, then you're doing it for the exposure, and yeah, by all means do it for free. But you need to make sure that that exposure is there and not just somebody going, will you work for exposure? Anyway, so there we go. So for me personally, I prefer a one-off fee than royalties, because I know where I stand then, and if I'm honest, royalties are so unpredictable when it comes to remixes that it's pointless going for them. So yeah, there we go. Jockemeyer, paper, high five. I bought the Fader Pro course, and anyone watching this should buy it. It was very useful to me because 1, it was done in Bitwig, and 2, it taught me that I was overcomplicating mixing. It was a turning point for me. Highly recommend it. Thank you very much. A double high five for that. Yeah, so I did a course for Fader Pro. That was Borg, I think. Yeah, it was the making of Borg from start to finish, which was a fairly big sounding track, and yeah, and I think a lot of people were surprised that I probably only had 10-12 channels of sound going on in that track. It really wasn't a big track. It was more about, and I've said this a million times on these videos before, but I'll say it again, it was more about picking the sounds and getting them right in the first place, rather than picking any old kick, drum, snare, clap, hi-hat, whatever, and then worrying about mixing it later. So yeah, and that's it. I think Yanis Lokmelis, paper, high five. St. Nicholas, paper, high five. Finn Fighter, paper, high five. That is it for this week. Once again, thank you very much for listening this far in. If you've made it this far in, then comment the word coffee. I'm not sure if we've had that. Probably have, must have. To let me know you've made it in this far. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you again this time next week. I'm saying it slowly because I'm wondering, what did I say in house admin? Oh yeah, so yeah, no, fine. My EP will be out this time next week, so expect me to talk a lot about that. See you next week. Cheers.